Hey everybody, this is Mitch Ferraro from F Street. I'm the investor relations manager here. Super excited to be having another conversation with one of our F Street knowledgeable people that we have in our office. One of the favorite things that I like about these podcasts is I get the opportunity to tap into a lot of knowledge from a lot of different people that are in our office here. Today, we have our development director, and he's also one of the principals here at F Street, Nick Jung. Super excited to talk about Nick Jung, and what we're going to dive into today is 1031 exchanges. If you don't know what that is, Nick's going to give us a great overview of what that looks like. But one of the first things, Nick, that I really just kind of want to talk about with the 1031 exchange is, what is a 1031 exchange? How does it work? And how can it benefit someone that might be selling a property and then looking to use a 1031 exchange to exchange into another property? So Nick, thank you for your time today. Really appreciate it. Go for it.
Mitch, love the conversation. I mean, 1031 is always a favorite topic, always one of our favorite topics in real estate. So 1031 exchange, it's the IRS code 1031. That's where it comes from. It's really a way for investors or owners of property to defer their capital gains taxes or their taxes in general. So we see it as one of the better tools for tax strategy for investors, for our developments, for our acquisitions and dispositions, and a great way to work for our investors. So generally, 1031 exchange is when you exchange like-kind property. People call it like-kind property. That's what we generally call it, our 1031 Starkville exchange. The really benefit to it is if you're exchanging a like-kind property, when you exchange that property, so say you sell a property for $1 million,
Yep.
that you originally paid $500,000 for it, you have $500,000 of gains.
Yep.
You're selling it for $1 million, so your boot is $1 million, and you have $500,000 of gains.
Yep.
You can move that $500,000 through a qualified intermediary because you cannot take the money. It has to go through a QI, is what we're going to start using from now on.
Yep.
Once you do that, you can go buy a like-kind property.
Sure.
Buying that like-kind property, you can go buy, call it a $2 million property, as long as it's like-kind, which, running the legal definition of like-kind, is actually nice and broad. So it can be, typically for us, we work in real estate, so I can go buy a industrial property after I've sold a multifamily property.
Sure.
Or sold a single family home. I can go buy an apartment building. So
Sure.
there's really, it's very flexible on that end. And you can buy up to, the rule is you can buy as many properties as you like. Try to stay under 3.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's other rules that come into play.
Okay.
But lots of rules with it. Very specific, but there's lots of value. So general rules is you have a 45-day identification window.
Okay.
And then you have 180 days to close.
Yep.
Easy.
Yep.
So those are your main rules.
Yep.
And the main things that go with it. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, if you're, let's just say you bought a 12 unit property, you sell it. Now you can go buy a 24 unit property, defer the taxes by basically using the 1031 exchange program through a QI, through someone that is qualified to take that money and then make that purchase. And then basically you have a time frame that this stuff has to happen. 45 days to identify, 180 days to actually close. So it's not like you can just sell this property, sit on the money, just wait for this opportunity to come up. You need to have it timed out pretty well to make sure that it happens. And I've done 1031 exchange myself in the past, and that's probably one of the hardest things to do, is to find an opportunity within that time frame and then to actually close on that property within that 180 days. Nick, help listeners better understand, like, if someone is going to sell a property and they're like, man, I don't know what opportunity I might be able to find, but they can work with F Street because we're always sourcing deals. We're always putting out LOIs. We're always looking for opportunities to purchase. How can an investor or one of our investors work with us to do a 1031?
Yeah, absolutely. So we work with a lot of different investors on their 1031s and making that a successful exchange, because we see a lot of deals, and we can get really unique with our structures because of the way we set up our syndication model, or we even work with investors on an individual basis and really just helping identify a property. We can really help them identify different properties. We have, every day we're submitting dozens of LOIs,
Yeah.
lots of looks, looking at nonstop properties. And the beauty of the 1031 exchange is we can really work it into any type of project.
Yep.
So for instance, we can put it into an acquisition. That's
Yep.
the typical normal exchange. It's usually not at the exact same time, but within that 45-day window is I sell a property, I go buy a new property within that 45-day identification and 180-day close. That's normal. But we can also do it in other unique ways. So for instance, we have ground up multifamily deals or ground up industrial projects. You can actually do a construction exchange. So that's another unique product. It's a very unique way to do it, but we've done it on multiple projects in the past. So we work with investors in different ways to create their value, or we have certain investors that only want to do industrial, and they just want, hey, I want cash flow, I want stable income, or I want cash flow, but I want a little more upside. And this is for 20, 30 years down the road, and they'll maybe go into a ground up project. So there's lots of different ways we work with investors to help structure that for them.
Yeah, so let's kind of dive into structure a little bit, because I think we can help investors better understand, like, hey, like what type of partnership would they be coming in with F Street? So if they have a property, they say, hey, I'm selling this property in a month, it's going to close in a month. Now we know that within a month, we're going to now look for a property, because we actually can maybe give ourselves a little more time because they're closing within a month, and you can add that onto the 45 days. But once we start doing that and start identifying these properties, what type of partnership or structure are they getting in with at F Street?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're working with a 1031 exchange, when you have the exchange to make it successful, you actually have to own the property. So our typical syndication model is you're coming in as a LP investor, and you own shares in the LLC that's acquiring the property, or the SPE, single purpose entity.
Yep.
Like kind of exchanges need to be a little different. With a
Yep.
1031, you actually have to own the real estate. So we do set it up as a TIC, or tenant in common. So on the deed for that real estate, you own that real estate. You own it with F Street or with our other investors or other partners, and we're all TIC members together owning the real estate.
Sure.
So you own, call it 50% of the real estate.
Yep.
And you'd actually be on the deed as my exchange on the actual property. So it's a little unique in that way, but we've structured it that way, and that's the way we have to structure it to make sure that exchange is successful.
So one of the biggest things too, Nick, is, what size of 1031 exchange are we looking at? I know sometimes people say, hey, I just flipped this home, I'm going to make $50,000. Can you 1031 exchange that? Or is it more like, hey, I just sold this multi-unit building, I'm going to make $1 million, I want a 1031 exchange? Kind of talk about what the scope is for us and what we're looking for.
For sure. So size matters. As much as I hate to say, it's going to be difficult if you're selling a $100,000 house and you have $30,000 of gains. It's going to be harder and probably not as advantageous to do it at that level, because there is costs and fees associated with the QI and the qualified intermediary. They have fees. There's closing fees. There's other fees that are coming associated with it. Not even on our end.
Yep.
But that makes it a little bit more difficult and challenging, because you're really not gaining that value through the effort of doing the exchange.
Yep.
That being said, if you have, call it 100,000, 200, 300 to $1 million plus, there's a lot more value to be gained on that, because you can, again, we talked about, snowball that.
Yeah.
So that's what we typically say, and typically say, do it up front. Talk to us, talk to someone up front about, hey, this is the type of transaction I have. How do we think we can make it work? How do we think we can put us in the best position possible?
Yeah. And I think that's a great point too, is that, listen, if you're thinking about selling your property next month or next year or in 2 years, it's great to have those conversations with us right now and up front, so that we can basically tag you as a 1031 exchange investor. We can make sure that when deals are coming across our desk, we can be looking at deals specifically for your 1031 exchange. So I think that's a big point as well, is that if you are thinking about selling it and you're going to be making some of these big gains, to let us know so we can start looking at deals, because again, that 45-day window goes very, very quickly. We want to make sure that we're starting to look at deals for you. So I think that's a good point, Nick, that, we want to be talk to us right away if you're thinking about possibly selling.
Absolutely. Just have the conversation, start the conversation. If it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense, but you can be ready when you want to pull the trigger, or, hey, I saw the right deal. There's also unique ways we can structure it with reverse exchanges, where you're actually buying a property before even completing your sale. So there's actually really unique ways we can work with 1031 exchanges and, other tax deferral methods.
So Nick, kind of just talk to me a little bit about, like, what does if you can give some numbers, like, what does it look like if I'm going to make $1 million on a property and I'm now going to put that into a 1031 exchange? Just give me a sense of what it looks like. Like, what money am I saving, or what money am I now have that I can use that I wouldn't have had if I wasn't going to use a 1031 exchange?
Yeah. So just going through, let's do hypothetical numbers. Say you bought a property 5 years ago for $1 million. That property you bought for $1 million is now worth $2 million.
Yep.
And just taking debt out of the picture, which we always use a little bit of leverage. And say you now have, all right, so I have $1 million of gains
Yep.
and a $2 million boot is what we would use.
Yep.
So you now have $1 million you need to place with a $2 million boot. So on that $1 million, not a CPA, but say you were to pay taxes on that $1 million of gains.
Yep.
You know, you're at either a 25% rate. It could be ordinary income. You could be at a 40% rate. You could potentially be less on $1 million. You're probably not going to be at the sub 15% rate. But talking about that, that's $250,000 of taxes you're now paying. So
Yep.
you've now turned that $1 million into only $750,000
Yep.
in hypothetical numbers. So if you do move into an exchange and you buy, let's call it a $5 million property,
Yep.
you can buy a $5 million property, put the $1 million down, get 80% leverage,
Yep.
and you can do that. And then that's deferring those taxes or delaying that tax payment through that 1031 exchange.
Yeah. So you're not even paying, you don't even have to use that $1 million as cash for the entire property. You can also go out and get leverage from a bank. Like you said, if it's a $5 million purchase, put $1 million down, go get the rest of the 80% from the bank. Now you bought a property for $1 million 5 years ago, and now you're buying a $5 million property 5 years later, which again, you want to talk about increasing your wealth, increasing generational wealth.
Absolutely.
This is what Nick was talking about when he says snowballing. So I think that's a great way for people to better understand, like, hey, just because you're making $1 million doesn't mean you have to go buy $1 million property. You can go buy a property for $5 million and get leverage.
Right. And you actually do need to buy a property for more than $1 million. You actually buy in hypothetical, when I mentioned the $2 million boot, you actually have to buy property worth more than $2 million
Sure.
to have a successful exchange.
Yep.
So another way we've done it. So say, for example, we've had instances like this in the past where, say, for example, you take your $1 million of gains and you buy a $3 million property.
Sure.
So you now have, call it $2 million of leverage. You can do that. We've worked with investors where you refinance in the first year. So you're actually returning now a bunch of money.
Yeah.
That money is not taxed
Yep.
because that's refinance proceeds. And you can take that, you can go buy another property.
Oh, yeah.
Or you buy 2 properties and then you refinance one of them, take that money, buy another property.
Yep.
So we've had instances where we've worked with our investors where they started with one property. They now have 5, 6, 7 properties
Yep.
that they've been able to keep exchanging into and growing their portfolio.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that's creating generational wealth right there.
Absolutely.
It's awesome. Very cool. Yeah. And I think one of the biggest things for our investors to understand is that we walk you through this entire process. Like, we're holding your hand. Nick is an attorney by trade. We also have one of our other principals, Josh Lurie, who is an attorney by trade. So we're structuring these things to make sure that we're doing them correctly and that the legal structure is done correctly. And we're doing it with you as a partnership. It's not like we're saying, hey, go send this to your attorney, go figure it out. And then when you're ready, then we'll come together and do all the legal talk. No, we're going to do this with you and make sure that you are comfortable with what we're doing and having conversations along that entire way. Nick, you don't have to necessarily give names or the exact deals, but can you give us an example of something that we've done in the past with a 1031 exchange with another investor?
Sure. So a recent exchange we've done is actually on a ground up project we completed and started in 2024. We had actually 2 different investors that had 1031 exchanges that both wanted to do successful exchanges, were interested in different projects, one slightly larger than the other, but these are exchanges we're talking of $3 to $4 million of equity. So we built them into the capital stack as part of the exchange. So they owned X percentage of the real estate. We also brought in our investors with that exchange.
Yep.
So on this deal, we had over $6 million of equity. We had 2 TIC partners come in.
Yep.
And then we had the third TIC being us,
Yep.
as us and our investor group coming in together with them.
Yeah.
So we still managed the asset. We set up all the TIC agreements with them. We set up all the structuring to make sure the project would be successful. So
Yep.
that was really one we just completed a few months ago. We've
Yeah.
done multiple other ones in the past where we've supported investors to buy, really have them be the only TIC partner with us. And it's just the 2 of us. We go in, we buy a property, and we cash flow.
Yeah.
So we've gotten really unique with our investors to make sure we can fit something that fits in their exchange. Because what we've talked about, that 45-day window is critical.
Yeah.
I mean, if you miss it, you miss it.
Right.
And, the IRS, The IRS they'll find out.
Yeah, and I think that's probably one of the biggest takeaways that I want investors to understand is that we are with you the entire way. We're making sure that we're identifying the property. Nick brings up a great point that, you know, you come in as a tick, you're going to be a part of a partnership with us. We're going to make sure that this gets done correctly. And I think one of the biggest points also is that when an investor comes and works with us, we're managing that asset, right? They're basically going to be well, if we structure it this way, right? Like
If they want to get more involved, they can get more involved as well. We're there for the joint success of the property.
Yep. And we have the experience with managing these assets and putting these assets together and making sure that they produce the cash flow that we're underwriting at, but we're doing a lot of that work. So you get to come in and benefit from the 1031 exchange and also benefit from us managing that asset, and you kind of just getting mailbox money and creating your wealth and creating generational wealth. So Nick, I think, you know, we've given a great amount of knowledge today on the 1031 exchange program. I think if anyone has any questions or anything like that on 1031 exchange, you can reach out to myself at mitch@fstreet.com. You can reach out to nick@fstreet.com. Nick, I just really appreciate the time. This is like a great opportunity for people to better understand what a 1031 is. And if anyone has any questions on it, they can let us know.
Yeah. Thank you, Mitch. And I think we got to stress how amazing of a tool the 1031 exchange is.
Yep.
I mean, to defer your taxes on your capital gains on a sale is massive. I mean, and that can snowball, and that can snowball over generations, and you can snowball it to a point where you work with your succession planner, and you can even cash out during these periods, and even have a step up in basis when you move the property to the next generation. So it is really a massive tool that is utilized by a lot of professionals out there, but is underutilized by many others.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for watching. Again, if you need to connect with us, you can find us. Also, you can check us out on YouTube and all of our other videos. Just search F Street. I appreciate everyone's time. And again, thanks, Nick. Appreciate it.